Wow! Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. Much love and respect to you. Appreciate you guys taking the time to come view the videos and the presentations I upload. We're gonna get back into this book. Just want to get through it. Get through all the books we're reading. A lot of good drop, a lot of good information. Some people might not be aware of. And this book has a lot of little interesting topics. So we're gonna read some of the topics here, various topics, but they're very interesting. The book is called Mysteries of Ancient America, Uncovering the Forbidden. And this is by Fritz Zimmerman. And we're going to pick up in this chapter where it's talking about the Indian legends of fairies. And there's an image here, shows an Indian, and it says mischievous little fairies known as Pugwudgies. According to religious texts, they are dark and foreboding shadows that have been cast across the lands of the mound builders of the Ohio Valley. This is the demonic world of ghosts and evil spirits that are perpetuated through the giant and dwarf races that once populated these regions. According to the Book of Enoch, both of these races had their origins with the falling angels. All right, a lot of people tell you that, fairies and dwarves and a lot of these things are actually part of the falling angels. It wasn't just giants. Shout out to a new breed for that drop. It is written in the Book of Enoch of the giant and dwarf races. Evil spirits proceed from their bodies because they are created from above, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and their primal origin. There will be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits they will be named. To gaze upon the vast necropolis of the many earthen tombs of the Ohio Valley is not to be confused with our present conceptualization of a graveyard. The mound builders believed in ancestral worship, where the dead placed in the burial mounds were not seen as individuals, but as part of a collective of spirits that could govern the future. Burial mounds were part of the religious canon of the mound builders and venerated places of worship. The mound itself acting as a conduit and portal that connected the living with the dead. This is a land where the ancient spirits still dwell. The importance of this concept is that the spirits did not leave their earthly realm to ascend to a heaven, Valhalla or happy hunting ground. In regards to the many burial mounds that contain the remains of giant skeletons across North America and the British Isles, the Book of Enoch says, giants begotten by the flesh and spirits will be called evil spirits on earth, and the earth will be their dwelling place. This is a spiritual elaboration of Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Analogous to the fallen angels and the giants are the writings about the fairies, nature spirits, and dwarf races, where there are striking similarities. The etymological root of the word fairies is fate, thus tying them with the giants as spiritual governors of the future. According to Scottish legends, where many giant remains have been found within the burial mounds, just like in the Americas, right, is the belief that the access to the fairy lands was accessed through the burial mounds. Fairies, according to the Book of Enoch, are fallen angels who were loyal to Lucifer. Lucifer? Does it really say the word Lucifer? They were simultaneously cast out of heaven and sent to hell by God. However, God spared the fairies in mid-descent and condemned them to live on earth. The fairies that fell to earth would become dwarfs, ghosts, and evil spirits. Those who fell into the forest would become wood spirits and wild men. Bigfoot? With a question mark. Those who fell into the lakes and rivers would become water spirits. And on the next page, we got this image. We've actually shown this, and I did a little dwarf video where they were saying this image right here they found in the mounds, in the spiral mound specifically, it's of a dwarf. So it says dwarf figure from the spiral mound that is depicted as a demonic figure. It has appropriately called the Lucifer pipe. The legends of an ancient dwarf race abound within the Sioux and Cherokee tribes, both with a tradition of burying their dead in earthen mounds. The Sioux and Cherokee Indians were part of the Hopewell mound builders and believed the dwarfs to have magical powers that are very similar to the Scottish legends. The Sioux believed that the dwarf race were the true owners of any sun lodge that was constructed. They also believed that the sun dance ritual was observed that by the dwarf and fairy spirits, and that they could determine the sincerity of the dancers and confer spiritual sights to those they chose to be worthy. The sun dance was very reminiscent of the British stories of the fairies, who could be seen dancing in a circle in the evenings, leaving a round imprint in the grass. Many of the henges and stone circles in Scotland have been identified as fairy rings. The henges in Scotland are identical to those in the Ohio Valley, just like the ones in Ohio Valley, showing a connection there, guys. Like the Sioux Sundance, the henges were constructed to venerate solar events of the equinox, solstices, and the May 1st and October 31st sunrise and sunset. Halloween, October 31st. So the 2 years the Celtics had, right? May and October. It was believed that entering a fairy ring on the evening of May 1st or October 31st was especially dangerous. A Scottish legend that if you walk around the stone circles, commonly known as the fairy ring, 3 times and make a wish, it will come true. All right, you guys hear that? So this is a diagram right here, October 31st solar alignment, Mount State Park, Henge, Anderson, Indiana, on the day of Halloween, guys. You see that? Wow. Henge located north of the main group of Mount State Park in Anderson, Indiana, that is aligned to the May 1st sunrise and the October 31st sunset. Is it a coincidence that fairies wearing blue robes have been sighted numerous times near this henge? The Newark, Ohio henge shares the same alignment. Another similarity between the ancient Scots and the Sioux is the belief that the fairies resided in the mounds. Lewis and Clark reported that while in South Dakota with the Sioux, they traveled to the junction of the Vermilion and Missouri rivers to see the mountain of the little people. Lewis wrote in his journal that the little people were devils and that the Omaha and Otto Sioux would not go near the place. Note that Indiana University determined the Straw Town, Indiana earthen circle was constructed by the Otto Sioux. The Book of Enoch and the Bible tied the giant and dwarf racers in the Ohio Valley and the British Isles with the falling angels. These spiritual manifestations are inexorably linked to the burial mounds and circles in these regions. These legends survive today with the Sioux, who have been documented as being in the Ohio Valley contemporaneously with the construction of the mounds and earthworks. All right. So that was a little bit there. We're gonna go over, some information we've read in other books about the ancient Pygmies of Tennessee and Kentucky that they found here. Here's a little skull diagram they have here in this chapter. Then came the race of Pygmies, small in stature but mighty in skill and deeds, who carved out the beauties of rock, cliff, and cave, and also endowed with the mightier power of destroying monster-land animals which infested the forest, endangering the life of man. And did not cliff, rock, and grotto test the skill of that departed race? And did not exhumed bones of giant animals bear as perfect witness to their former existence and power and the truth of this lore, as did the Homo Diluvia? Testis of a century ago confirmed the story of the deluge. Legends of the Iroquois, American Antiquarian and Oriental Journal, 1905. And it says here, Smithsonian Contribution to Knowledge, Explorations of the Aboriginal Remains in Tennessee, 1876. When Kentucky was first explored, great numbers of human bodies are said to have been found in a state of preservation in a cave near Lexington. As the pioneers did not appear to attach much importance to the antiquities, these bodies were not preserved. The bodies found in the Saltpeter Cave of Kentucky are said to have been considerably smaller than the men of our times, and their teeth are described as long, white and sharp, and separated by considerable intervals. Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee, 1823. A number of small skeletons were discovered in a few miles from Sparta, Tennessee, in White County, an account of which was given by Mr. Lane. The graves were about 2 feet in length, 14 inches broad, and 16 inches deep. These extend promiscuously throughout the farm of Mr. Lane and in large and closely connected burying ground in the vicinity. There were others of the same description 4 miles south of Sparta, and it is said that hundreds of them might be found throughout the locality. There is no discernible rising on the surface of the earth on account of these graves, and they were found by sinking an iron rod into the ground until it struck the covering stone of the coffins. These graves generally contain small skeletons of human beings so much decayed that they could not be removed without being broken to pieces or crumbling to dust. And one skeleton lay on its back with its feet drawn up so as to raise the knees about 4 inches above the bottom of the grave. The head was also so raised as to cause the chin to lie upon the breast. This skeleton, carefully measured as it lay, was found to be from a little below the ankle joints to the top of the skull 2 feet 10 inches, making a proper allowance for the bending of the legs and in the inclination of the head. But one grave of the whole series was of a larger size and of a different form, being constructed after the manner of a coffin, 14 inches broad at the head, 22 at the elbow, and 10 at the foot. The side and ends were of flat stone, the same as those of the small graves. In this grave lay a skeleton 5 feet 5 inches long, the head to the waist and the feet to the east. The skeleton was carefully uncovered without displacing any of the bones until the whole was exposed to view. Its mouth was wide open and contained a full set of teeth. The arms lay along the side. The ribs were broad and flat and more than double the size of those of the Pygmies. The head was also larger, the eyes wider apart, and the forehead higher than those in the smaller graves. The skull was perfect, with the exception of a fracture on the right cheekbone and a quantity of fine straight hair adhered to it, which was of a bright gray color. No vessels or trinkets were found with this skeleton, and from the great dissimilarity in the shape of its head and the size and form of the bones, it seemed to belong to a different tribe from the skeletons of the smaller graves. From the great number of small graves found here, says Mr. Lane, all of the same description, and among them all but one being of a large size, it seems to indicate that there was in ancient times a race of people whose height was from 2 feet 10 to 3 feet. As old as the hair of the large skeleton seems to be, there was not a tooth lost or unsound in either jaw. But one of the pygmy heads had in the upper jaw a decayed tooth, whence it was conjectured that the person to whom the skeleton belonged was older than the former. Specimens of the contents of these graves were submitted to the medical gentlemen of Nashville, and various opinions were entertained as to the maturity or infancy of the smaller skeletons. The prevailing one seemed to be that these skeletons belonged to adult persons of small size, and also that some of the bones found were those of animals. All right, we're just talking about pygmies. All right, in Tennessee, massive, in Kentucky, mass graves, hundreds of graves there, thousands of graves there, actually. All right, so we move on to the next chapter that we're going to read in this book, and it's regarding here, as it says, Mystery of the Martindale Mummy, a tale of two mummies. All right, the Martindale Mummy. And there's an image here of the Martindale Mummy holding a baby. It's actually two mummies in one. So this is an early photograph of the Martindale Mummy. There is a mystery that surrounds the Martindale Mummy, a 6'9" woman holding a babe in her arms, who seems to be located in two separate museums. One of the locations where the mummy is shown is as a roadside attraction along Interstate 10 between El Paso, Texas, and Tucson, Arizona, where it is hyped as the Thing. The other location of the apparent same mummy is in the Believe It or Not Museum in Orlando, Florida. The Thing. Touted as the Thing, the Martindale Mummy is a roadside attraction in Arizona. Tracking the history of the mummy is difficult, but this is the fragmented timeline I have been able to put together. The original find was described in the 19th century. The giant mummy was not an isolated find. In 1885, in California's Yosemite Valley, a party of miners headed by Mr. G.F. Martindale noticed a wall of stone on a rock face that did not appear to be of natural origin. As they removed the rock wall, they came upon another stone wall that was described as being done by someone skilled in masonry. They described the joints between the rocks as being a uniform of 1/8 of an inch in thickness, as pretty as any wall on any building I have ever seen, is how one of the miners described it. Upon entering the stone walled tomb, they discovered a large mummified corpse placed on a carved ledge in the cave. The mummified remains were that of a woman who measured 6 feet 8 inches in length. The corpse was wrapped in what appeared to be animal skins. The miners removed parts of the animal skins to view the corpse and found it to be that of a woman holding a child to her breast. At an unknown date, the mummy is placed in the State Historical Society Museum in Topeka, Kansas. 1940s, Smith said he purchased the mummies from Mrs. Miller in Kansas and leased them to a guy named Fleming, who owned a traveling carnival. 1940s, Fleming is known to have the mummy until at least 1948. 1968, after being missing for over 20 years, the mummy resurfaces in a warehouse in Texas where it is reclaimed by the Smith family. 1992, Smith's health is failing and Dr. Carmel purchases the mummy, where it is later sold the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Orlando, Florida in 1998. So here's again another picture of it, as you guys can see, right? The Smiths are photographed with the mummy in the late 1960s in that picture right there, okay? There are various stories of how the mummy ended up in Arizona. They are all based on the fact that the mummy is a hoax, but it has to be a hoax, or the NAGPRA laws would snatch it up and it would never be seen again. All right, so they had to call it a hoax so they would leave them alone. The mummy at Ripley's is the forgery, and the thing is the actual Martindale mummy. So the one in Arizona is the actual original. There are some photos floating on the net of the hand of the mummy in Florida that show it was assembled with iron nails. No such scrutiny has been followed up on the thing. One archaeologist's opinion of the thing was maybe, in the world of searching for giants, that is about as good as it gets, all right? Because it is almost 7 feet tall, they call it a giant, but that's not so tall, right? But either way, they try to make this into a hoax. And now, I guess, I don't know if it's still in Arizona, but I think it's actually gone now. All right, moving on to the next chapter, guys. We have here the Walam Olum and the Massacres on the Northern Front. And here we got some hieroglyphics or writing or drawings, and that's the descriptions right next to them. As you see, the first one says, Cabin Man was chief, the Allegheny possessed the east. Okay, so it's like a story being told. And again, from the Lenape and Their Legends by Daniel G. Brinton, 1884. Okay, this is what he posted in his book. Were I to reconstruct their ancient history from the Walam Olum, as I understand it, the result would read as follows. Again, from the 1884 book. At some remote period, their ancestors dwelt far to the northeast on Tidewater, probably at Labrador. They journeyed south and west till they reached a broad water, full of islands and abounding in fish, perhaps the St. Lawrence, about the Thousand Islands, or Thousand Isles. They crossed and dwelt for some generations in the pine and hemlock regions of New York, fighting more or less with the Snake people and the Taliga, agricultural nations, living in stationary villages to the southeast of them in the area of Ohio and Indiana. They drove out the former, but the latter remained on the upper Ohio and its branches. The Lenape now settled on the streams in Indiana, wished to remove to the east to join the Mohegans and other of their king, who had moved there directly from northern New York. They therefore united with the Hurons, Talamatans, to drive out the Taliga from the upper Ohio. And it says here in the history, manners, and customs of the Indian nations who once inhabited Pennsylvania and the neighboring states from Volume 12 from 1876. The Lenape, according to the traditions handed down to them by their ancestors, resided many hundred years ago in a very distant country in the western part of the American continent. For some reason which I do not find accounted for, they determined on migrating to the eastward, and accordingly set out together in a body. After a very long journey and many nights, encampments by the way, they at length arrived on the Nemesi Sipu, where they fell in with the Mengue, who had likewise emigrated from a distant country and had struck upon this river somewhat higher up. Their object was the same with that of the Delawares. They were proceeding on to the eastward, until they should find a country that pleased them. The spies, which the Lenape had sent forward for the purpose of reconnoitering, reconnaissance, right? Reconnoitering, sorry about the pronunciation, you guys can see it, had long before their arrival discovered that the country east of the Mississippi was inhabited by a very powerful nation, who had many large towns built on the great rivers flowing through their land. Those people, as I was told, called themselves Taliga or Taligewi. Colonel John Gibson, however, a gentle man who has a thorough knowledge of the Indians and speaks several of their language, is of opinion that they were not called Taligewi but Aligewi. And it would seem that he is right, from the traces of their name which still remain in the country, the Allegheny River and mountains having indubitably been named after them. Indubitably. The Delawares still called the former Aligewi Sipu, the river of the Aligewi. We have adopted, I know not for what reason, its Iroquois name. Ohio, which the French had literally translated into La Belle Riviere, the beautiful river. A branch of it, however, still retains the ancient name Allegheny. Many wonderful things are told of this famous people. They are said to have been remarkably tall and stout, and there is a tradition that there were giants among them, people of much larger size than the tallest of the Lenape. It is related that they had built to themselves regular fortifications or entrenchments, from whence they would sally out, but were generally repulsed. I have seen many of the fortifications said to have been built by them, two of which in particular were remarkable. One of them was near the mouth of the river Huron, which empties itself into the lake St. Clair, on the north side of that lake, at the distance of about 20 miles northeast of Detroit. This spot of ground was in the year 1786 owned and occupied by Mr. Tucker. The other works, properly entrenchments, being walls or banks of earth regularly thrown up with a deep ditch on the outside, were on the Huron River, east of the Sandusky, about 6 or 8 miles from Lake Erie. Outside of the gateways of each of these two entrenchments, which lay within a mile of each other, were a number of large flat mounds, in which the Indian pilot said were buried hundreds of the slain Taligewi, whom I shall hereafter with Colonel Gibson call Aligewi. Of these entrenchments, Mr. Abraham Steiner, who was with me at the time when I saw them, gave a very accurate description, which was published at Philadelphia in 1789 or 1790, in some periodical work, the name of which I cannot at present remember. All right, so continue, says here, the etymology of Walam Olum is derived from ancient Hebrew language, all right? Walam Olum, famous in the Delaware Lenape, right, history, is actually from the Hebrew language, Hebrew words. What does it mean? Ice is unveiled, a master key to the mysteries. All right, so this is from Madame Blavatsky's book, Master Key. So ice is unveiled, a master key to the mysteries of the ancient and modern science and theology, right, from Blavatsky. Now, according to her, listen, it says, Shem, in the 10th chapter of Genesis, is made the father of all children of Eber, or Elam, Ulam, or Elam. Listen, Elam, that's big, that's okay. So Elam, Olum, Elam, remember, he's the progenitor of the Elamites. That's one of Shem's sons. not where the Hebrews come out of, but through another line, because Eber comes out of Arphaxad, one of Elam's brothers. But either way, Elam is a progenitor of the Elamites, which is supposedly the progenitor of the Persians, the original Persians. All right, so very interesting here. So Elam, or Olam, or Elam, and Ashur, another son of Shem, right, a brother of Arphaxad. Ashur, or Assyria, right? He's the progenitor of the Assyrians. These are all sons of Shem. The Nephilim, or fallen men, Gebers, mighty men spoken of in Genesis, says here, volume 1:4, come from, or 6, right? 6:4, sorry, come from Ulam, men of Shem. The fallen come from Shem. What does she mean by that, Blavatsky? Elam, another of the sons of Shem, is Olam, and refers to an order of cycle of events. In Ecclesiastes 3:11, it is termed world, and Ezekiel 36:20 of old time. In Genesis 111, what's that, 111:22? The word stands as forever. And in chapter 9:4, in the following words, they were Nephilim, giants, fallen men, or titans on the earth. Titans. Where's the titans from? Remember the book we've been reading, Researches into the Lost History of America. The word is synonymous with Aeon. In Proverbs 8:23, it reads, I was infused from Olam, from Ra's wisdom. By this sentence, the wise King Kabbalist refers to one of the mysteries of the human spirit, the immortal crown of the man Trinity. All right, so again, we're quoting Blavatsky. We got to dodge a little hijack with Blavatsky, guys. If you don't know what you got to know, she'd be adding a lot of things. It gets really occult and theosophical. Remember, one of her master teachers or ascended masters was Jamal Afghani, same guy who Drew Ali went to visit in Egypt and became his master teacher. Yeah, check out my video on that. It says here, mass graveyards. We're moving on to the next chapter. Mass graveyards on the southern tier of the eastern Great Lakes. And this is an image of ancient works of Ashtabula County in Ohio. All right, so remember, we've gone over so much of these embankments, trenches, mounds, all over the Americas. Their measurements, remember, the alignments to the stars and to the sun and the moon and all that, right? So Archaeological Atlas of Ohio, 1914, that's where the image is coming from, listed 5 enclosures in Ashtabula County, okay? And it says History of Ashtabula County, Ohio, 1878. The most remarkable of these ancient structures are the 3 which are located on the banks of the Coneot, one on the Pymatunen and 3rd near a stream called Phelps Creek and the township of Windsor. All are works of defense and are well chosen for this purpose. Graveyard. There are burial places belonging to the ancient races in the vicinity. An ancient burying ground was situated a little west of the village, which occupied an area of about 4 acres. It was upon the bank of the stream, was in the form of an oblong, and was laid out in lots, exhibiting all the order and propriety of modern burials. These graves, disposed in straight rows with intervening spaces and alleys, covered the whole area and were estimated to have been 2,000 or 3,000 in number. Wow. You guys hear that? They were examined as early as 1800 and were found to contain human bones, some of which were of large size. All right, so that's nothing new. We're talking about 7-footers, 8-footers, you know. The mounds, when open, contain a quantity of charcoal, which may have been the remains of sacrificial fires or cremations, and fragments of earthenware, which may have been the remnants of vessels in which incense was offered. There have been also traces of ancient cultivation observed, the land once having been thrown up into squares and terraces and laid out into gardens. All right, container says here Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania graveyards. History of Erie County, Pennsylvania, 1862. Many indications have been found in the county proving conclusively that it was once peopled by a different race from the Indians who were found here when it was first visited by European men. When the link of the Erie and Pittsburgh Railroad from the Lakeshore Road to the dock at Erie was in the process of construction, the laborers dug into great masses of bones at the crossing of the public road, which runs by the rolling mill. From the promiscuous way in which they were thrown together, it is surmised that a terrible battle must have taken place in the vicinity at some day, so far distant that not even a tradition, if the event has been preserved, or of the event. There's a lot of typos in these Kindle books. An ancient graveyard was discovered in 1820 on the land now known as Dr. Carter's and Dickinson Place in Erie, which created quite a sensation at the time. Dr. Albert Thayer dug up some of the bones and all indicated the race of beings of immense size, all right? Giants, probably 7-footers, 8-footers, 9-footers, right? Just like we've been talking about in my Giants videos, right? Nothing new here. And it says here, New York, Chautauqua County, the archaeological history of New York, 1920. Those are the sources, right? Fort number 1, with mass burial there, are several sites in or near Westfield Village, the largest being a walled enclosure and village plat, half a mile south of West Main Street on Hugh McNeil's land. The graves are shallow and 2 ossuaries containing 40 or 50 skeletons were opened. Fort number 5, with mass burial, there was a large circular work near the Erie Railroad crossing the road from Fredonia to Forestville, and a large grave many human skeletons of all ages were mingled. Mass burial, a trench opened in Stedman in 1867, was full of human bones, but without relics. It was on the line of the town of Harmony. There were over 20 skeletons arranged in rows. Fort 18. Another work is on high land, 160 rods from Casadaga Creek, with a small stream on the southern side. Many skeletons within had horizontal burial. From the gate in the northeastern part, a trail led to a cemetery 50 rods away. Here were 3 large rectangular graves with from 30 to 60 skeletons in a sitting posture. And it goes onto Erie County, Antiquities of the State of New York, 1851. And here's a drawing of this trenches and mounds on Erie County, right? And it says ancient work, Clarence Township. A mile northward of the last work last described and occupying a position in no respect well adapted for defense is the enclosure here presented. It is now much defaced. The part, however, which has never been cultivated is very distinct, and 1 or 2 other short sections may yet with some difficulty be traced. A large Indian cemetery is said to exist somewhere between this work and the one just noticed. Mass burial. However, true this may be, about a half a mile to the northwest on the land of Mr. Fillmore, there is a large deposit of bones, a bone pit, some 14 feet square and 4 or 5 in depth, filled with crumbling human skeletons. The spot was marked by a very slight elevation of the earth, a foot or 2 in height. Right? He got another entrenchment, enclosure, mound, ancient works, the town of Erie County, New York. Fort number 10 near Clarence. Still another a mile beyond is another, which although upon the grounds which have been cleared is yet perfect. It is situated upon a sandy, slightly elevated peninsula, which projects into a low tangled swamp. A narrow strip of dry ground connects it with the higher lands, which border the swamp and the south. It is small, containing less than an acre. The position, for the purposes of concealment and defense, is admirably chosen. And another mass grave, A mile eastward upon a dry sandy spot is another of the bone pits, already several times referred to, which is estimated by those who excavated it originally to have contained 400 skeletons heaped promiscuously together. They were individuals of every age and sex. All right, you guys hear all these bone pits and these mound enclosures? What's going on here? Huh? What's the history? Continuing here, Niagara County. 4,000, listen, 4,000 skeletons discovered in a mass burial pit in New York. History of Niagara County, New York, 1878, town of Cambria. A search enabled them to come to a pit, but a slight distance from the surface. The top of the pit was covered with slabs of the Medina sandstone and was 24 feet square by 4.5 in depth, the planes agreeing with the 4 cardinal points. It was filled with human bones of both sexes and all ages. They dug down at one extremity and found the same layers to extend to the bottom, which was the same dry loam. And from their calculations, they deduced that at least 4,000 souls had perished one great massacre. All right, 4,000, wow. In one skull, 2 flint arrowheads were found, and many had the appearance of having been fractured and cleft open by a sudden blow. They were piled in regular layers, but with no regard to size or sex. 150 persons a day visited this spot the first season and carried off the bones. They are now nearly all gone and the pit plowed over. The remains of a wall were traced near the vault. Some of the bones found in the latter were of unusual size. One of these was a thigh bone that had been healed of an oblique fracture. One was the upper half of a skull so large that of a common man would not fill it. Giant people here too, found here. Continuing says here, Orleans County. Pioneer history of Orleans County, New York, 1871. About 1.5 miles west of Shelby Center in Orleans County is an ancient work, a broad dish enclosed in a form nearly circular, about 3 acres of land. The ditch is at this day well defined, several feet deep. Adjoining the spot on the south is a swamp was once doubtless, if not a lake, an impassable morass. From the interior of the enclosure made by the ditch, there is what appears to have been a passageway in the side next to the swamp. No other breach occurs in the entire circuit of embankment. There are accumulated within and near this fort large piles of small stones of a size convenient to be thrown by hand or with a sling. Mass grave. A half-mile west of the fort is a sand hill. Here a large number of human skeletons have been exhumed in a perfect state. Great numbers appear to have been buried in the same grave. Many of the skulls appear to have been broken with clubs or stones. Continuing, Oswego County, The Archaeological History of New York, 1920, and Antiquities of the State of New York, 1851. Mass grave. Near the town of Fulton, one of the west side of the Oswego River, is an eminence called the Bone Hill, in which have been found great numbers of human bones promiscuously heaped together. They are much decayed. Continuing, History of Madison County, New York, 1872. Indian relics were so abundant and graves so numerous that it is believed there must have been a great battle fought here in the ages past. Beads could be picked up here and there in considerable quantities. Hatchets, axes, and many other curious relics are scattered about, having been covered with the accumulating soil of ages, and which the husbandmen plow bring to the surface. Curiosity seekers have carried off many of these relics, but there is, however, now and then an intent where they are allowed to remain. More than a mile on the road northeast of Munnsville Depot, in the woods, there is an Indian skull lying partly exposed among the rubbish of the woods. Several individuals are now living who noticed the same skull 30 years ago. It is an out-of-the-way place. It has remained undisturbed till the present time. Some of the skeletons found in these burial grounds are of extraordinary size. One gentleman remarks that he took one of the large jawbones and found it sufficiently ample to cover his own lower jaw. Another person stated that he took one of the skulls from which the base had decayed and found he could place it with ease over the outside of his own heap. Continuing, Jefferson County. And there's an image here of the square fort located in Jefferson County, New York. And there's a drawing of the enclosure, embankment, the mound, earth mound enclosure. It's almost like a square but circular, right? It says the archaeological history of New York, 1920. Remember, these are the sources. You can literally find these are anthropological or historical sources, all right, from 1920. 3 miles to the westward of the enclosure last described, near Sanford's Corners, was formerly another work of similar character but larger in size. Only a small portion of the embankment is yet visible. The dotted lines, however, show the original outlines, according to the recollection of those who were acquainted with the work before it was disturbed. The walls then measured not less than 6 feet in height, measuring from the bottom of the trench. Within the area are found great numbers of the shells of the freshwater mollusk, accumulations of burnt matter, quantities of pottery and fragments, with broken pipes, etc. Some of the pipes are of good workmanship and fine finish. In this vicinity also have skeletons been found, all buried in a sitting posture. Several other works formerly existed in this township, but they have been either entirely or in great part obliterated. One is spoken of near Felt's Mills, but no opportunity was afforded to examine it. Fort number 5, Ancient Work, Rutland Township. The embankment is not of uniform dimensions. In some places, it is elevated but a foot or 18 inches by 4 or 5 feet base, while in others it is perhaps 3 feet in height. The ditch is also irregular, in sections scarcely exceeding a large plow, furrow in depth and width. In fact, these works seem imperfect and to have been constructed in haste for temporary purposes. Then we got another drawing here, and it seems this one's also Jefferson County, New York. This is from a drawing in 1848 from Squire and Davis, Smithsonian scholarly book. They did a lot of great surveys and drew a lot of these mounds have been destroyed or built over. There's towns over them or whatever, now, in modern times. Mass grave human bones have been discovered beneath the leaves, and in nearly every part of the trench, skeletons of adults of both sexes, of children and infants, have been found, covered only by the vegetable accumulations. They seem to have been thrown together promiscuously. All right, and another drawing here of an ancient work here, earthen work, enclosure in Jefferson County, New York. Fort 7, ancient work, Leray Township, 6 miles northeast of Watertown. In the same township, with the foregoing work, and about 4 miles distant, in a northwest direction, is the work here represented. It occupies a small sandy elevation, situated in the midst of low grounds. It is lozenge shaped, and it is the most regular of any ancient structure, which has fallen under the notice of the author in the state, where the lines are interrupted on the north. The ground is considerably elevated and subsides abruptly, precluding the necessity of an embankment for defensive purposes. Near this work, skeletons have been frequently exhumed. Continuing, History of Jefferson County, New York, 1878. Near the northwest corner of Rodman, on lot number 2 on the farm of Jared Freeman, was formerly an interesting work, of which no trace remains except a boulder of gneiss, worn smooth by grinding. Before the place had been cultivated, it is said to have shown an oval double bank with an intervening crescent-shaped space and a short bank running down. A gentle slope to a small stream on the sources of Stony Creek that flows near. Several hundred bushels of burnt corn were turned out, over an area 1 rod by 8, showing that this must have been an immense magazine of food. On the farm of Jacob Heath, on lot number 25 near the west line of Rodman, and on the north bank of the North Sandy Creek, a short distance above the confluence of the two main branches of that stream, there formerly existed an enclosure of the same class. It included about 3 acres, was overgrown with heavy timber, and furnished within and without, when plowed, a great quantity and variety of terracotta and fragments but not metallic relics. Under the roots of a large maple was dug up the bones of a man of great stature, and furnished with entire rows of double teeth, all right, very famous. A lot of these giants they find in double layers, double teeth, double rows, I'm sorry, of teeth in their mouth, in the bottom and in the top. All right, continuing, we're just going to read another chapter here in this book. And it says here, Dakota Sioux Serpent Mounds. It should be stated, however, that the Sioux proper were called by the Algonquins the snake-like ones. The Walam Olum states that the Lenape encountered the snakes before they reacted, the Talagewi, but says they were weak and hid themselves in the swamps. Dr. Brinton remarks that the Talik or Talaiki Cherokee are not mentioned in the Walam Olum as the mound builders, all right? They're not the mound builders. And that the inference either is that the snake people, the Acost or Akonaps, dwelt in the valleys north of the Ohio River, in the corner of western Ohio and Indiana, where the most important earthworks are found, and singularly enough, none more remarkable than the immense effigy of the serpent in Adams County, which winds its gigantic coil over 700 feet in length on the summit of a bold bluff overlooking Brush Creek. Who then were the snake people? The region in Ohio where the serpent effigies are the most prominent was once the dwelling place of a tribe of hunters who are known to have migrated from the original seats east of the Alleghenies, following the buffalo in their retreat westward, namely the Dakotas or Sioux. And it is quite likely that the name of the snake people, which tradition has preserved, was the one which was given to them. One plausible explanation is that this people erected the most of the effigies in this region, and that they built the earliest or oldest of the two forts, which are now to be seen upon the summit of the hill at Fort Ancient, the one whose walls are supposed to have been in the shape of tortoise and rolling serpents, its gateway guarded by their heads. Confirmatory of this is the fact that the serpent effigies are found all along the track taken by the Dakotas in their migration westward to their present seats. One was discovered by the writer on the bluff near Quincy, Illinois, another on the bluffs near Cassville, Wisconsin, another on the ridge near Lake Wingra near Madison, Wisconsin, another near Mayville, Wisconsin, still another discovered by Professor J. A. Todd on the bluff called Dakota. And the fact that carved animal pipes resembling those in Ohio have been found in the mounds in Illinois and Iowa, the most interesting of which has the serpent coiled around the bowl, exactly as the one found in the fort called Clark's Work. Another explanation is interesting. There is in Ohio an effigy of a bird which is very much like the birds which have been inscribed on the rocks in Dakota. These are supposed to represent the thunderbird, a nature-powered divinity among the Dakotas, and which had its abode near the Pipestone Quarry in Minnesota. This remarkable figure was situated upon a hilltop near the east branch of the Miami River. The effigy is contained within a square enclosure, the walls of which conform to the shape of bluffs and are very crooked. The entrances to the enclosure are guarded by fragmentary walls, which are placed within the gateway. The figure itself has not been heretofore recognized as an effigy, but on examining it closely, we discover in it the head and tail and outspread wings of a bird. The wings having been formed in such a way as to represent long, drooping feathers, the very features which symbolize the rain. These various facts, which has recently come to light, rendered very probable that the effigy builders were all of them serpent worshippers, as well as animal worshippers, and that wherever they had a location, they erected shrines to this serpent divinity and made their offering to it as one of the sky gods. So that's very interesting. We're talking about a combination of serpent and birds, right? We're talking about feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl sky. We're talking about dracons. A fourth explanation is the one suggested by the serpent effigy discovered in Adams County, Illinois. Here the serpent is situated upon the summit of a hill, which overlooks the bottomland of the Mississippi River for many miles, making it a conspicuous object. Here too the effigy is conformed to the shape of the bluff as it is in Ohio. The sinistral turn of the effigies has been recognized in both places. The fact that there were fire beds and evidences of cremation of bodies in the bottom of the mound, which formed a prominent object in the center of the body of the serpent, is another point of interest. The fire was an emblem of sun worship and was sacred to the sun. The phallic symbol was also discovered here. The bodies were placed upon their backs and face turned upward to the sun. The hands folded over the thighs. The skeletons of two snakes were found coiled up between the hands near the secret parts of the body. The number 4 was also observed here. This is a common symbol among the sun worshippers. There were 4 large mounds in the center of the effigy. There were 4 burial places in the top of one of the mounds. The points of the compass haven't been observed in the burials. What is most singular about the whole find was that the altar or firebed was placed upon the summit of a deposit of black soil, constituted a circular or saucer-like depression in the soil, but all the soil which was placed above the altar and made the rest of the mound was a strong contrast, as it was a light-colored sand. A white streak of burnt lime and a red streak of bark or some other substance, a gray streak of ashes indicating between the 2 layers. Here then we have the symbols which were common in the East and which were so expressive of the nature powers, the contrast between light and darkness, the cardinal points, the number 4, the several colors, the sinistral turn, the fire, the cremated bodies, and the serpent effigy itself all being symbols of sun worship, according to their interpretation. We imagine that these symbols have been introduced in connection with sacred mysteries and were preserved by some secret society or unknown organization, and that the rites practiced were part of the sacred mysteries which were observed. The situation is to be noticed. They were situated in the wildest places and were often on the summits of hills where their form could be seen at a great distance. They were perhaps shrines and places of sacrifice. The altars and fire beds are found in connection with them. They were calculated to inspire terror in the minds of superstitious people, and yet were in harmony with the scenes of nature about them. The fires that were lighted upon them sent out their glare through the darkness and covered the whole region with lurid light. They were not merely shrines or places of worship, but were also places of sacrifice where human bodies were cremated and mystic ceremonies were practiced. We cannot look upon these serpent effigies in the same way that we do upon the animal figures, for there were strange contortions and outer shapes and ghastly scenes were connected with them. And that's from the American Antiquarian and Oriental Journal, 1894. And here's an image of those serpent mounds right here. It says here the Florida serpent effigy is depicted swallowing an egg, just like the one in Ohio. The different Hopewellian earthworks are located throughout Florida, showing they had cultural and commercial intercourse with the Ohio Valley. And it says here Gwinnett County, Georgia serpent. A stone serpent was reported in Hopewell archaeology as being located in Gwinnett County, 50 miles distant from Athens. The mound was described as 100 feet in length with small circular cairn depicting the head. Archaeologists attribute it as Hopewellian. So people from that region of North America connecting and having some influence there in Florida. Kentucky serpents. A stone serpent mound is reported in Catlettsburg, Kentucky, overlooking the Big Sandy River in Boyd County, Kentucky. And it says here Ohio's other serpent mounds, right? There's so many there. The Great Miami River in this image, and then the mounds right? Many think that the famous Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio is a singular entity, but in fact, many of the earthworks in Ohio are either actual serpent effigies or are serpentine in form. The two serpent heads and sun circles are perfectly preserved. The site is not maintained and can only be seen in the winter months. Only could be seen in the winter months. Wow. Most serpent effigies were constructed to venerate the sun god, dodge the hijack. However, it was also consort of the Earth Mother and acted as a protector of the dead. The diagram of the Serpentine Mound above is from the Junction Group in Ross County, Ohio. This Serpent Mound is in Clinton County, Ohio, and is the only one left of this size in Ohio. A burial mound is just out of the view to the right. And it says here in the bottom, at Spruce Hill in Ross County, Ohio, the gateway is a stone effigy of two serpent heads forming the entrance. Wow. Just like it shows in the picture here. And this must be the boots on the ground picture right here, what it looks like. The same type of oblique angled gateway representing two serpent heads is found at the Hilltop Enclosure in Germantown, Ohio. So same thing here in Germantown, Ohio. This is an image, it says here, map of Serpent Mound in Warren County from June 1894. Wow, it's a lot of serpent mounds here, right? The Serpent Mound formerly in Warren County was destroyed by a gravel company. An identical Serpent Mound was constructed north of Holton, Indiana. Serpent Mound in Indiana, this is the picture, very bad quality, is identical to the destroyed Serpent Mound that was formerly in Warren County, Ohio. So like this one, Warren County, Ohio. Iowa Serpent Mounds. Serpent symbol and the worship of the reciprocal principles of nature in America by E.G. Squire. Mr. Pigeon also speaks of mounds arranged in serpentine form in Iowa, at a place formerly known as Prairie Laporte, now called Guttenberg. Also at a place 7 miles north of these on the Turkey River, where the range is 2.5 miles long, the mounds occurring at regular intervals. A plan of these is given. 20 miles to the westward of this locality is the effigy of a great serpent, with the effigy of a tortoise in front of its mouth. This serpentine structure is 1,004 feet long, 18 feet broad, at its widest part, and 6 feet high. All right. So here's like a little diagram of what it says, Illinois serpents. Hopewell Sioux, more specifically the Winnebago, were the builders of this serpent mound, swallowing an egg in the city of Chicago, Galena, Illinois serpent, just like the main serpent mound, right, in Adams County. Is it really a serpent swallowing an egg, or is it the sperm and the egg, the act of conception, like I mentioned in my other videos? But they all have the same kind of theme. You see that? A smaller version of the serpent effigy in Adams County, swallowing an egg, Ohio, was reported near Galena, Illinois, and continues as Wisconsin serpents. And here's an image, Wisconsin's Hopewell Sioux solar serpent, a map of ditch-like features and prehistoric pits on Eagle Island near Lake Mills, Wisconsin. And they're showing the winter solstice alignment of the sunrise. Serpent Mound at Rice Lake, Wisconsin. And then we have another one here. It says Serpent Mound in the town of Brookfield, Milwaukee County, which were supposed to be representations of the Mississauga rattlesnake. Minnesota serpents, huh? And then we got another drawing here. You guys see? Serpent effigy enclosure in Pipestone County, Minnesota. Okay. The Minnesota serpents. And then we have Clinton County, Ohio. American Antiquarian, 1897. The Winnebago Sioux stated that when they came to Wisconsin, the Dakotas held and worked the mines of native copper on the south shore of Lake Superior. All right, who's your copper miners? So the Sioux are very ancient. A lot of people, mix up the ancient ones with the modern ones, and They don't even understand there's a lot of Eastern Siouans that split from there, from Ohio. That was their homeland before they split east and west. The Dakota traditions are very positive that they formerly worked these mines, holding them as the property of the entire Dakota nation, as they afterwards held the pipestone quarries of Minnesota. It is worth noting that the name Pusan was used to describe at least two other bodies of water in North America, neither of which is similar to Green Bay, in which quality or biological productivity. Cataracts Creek near Chautauqua, New York, was named Rivière à la Terre Pointe on a map by the French cartographer Sanson. The Jesuit Relations and Allied Documents. That's the source. Continuing, it says Smithsonian Institute Bureau of Ethnology, 1898 to 1899, Cattaraugus County, New York. Near the station of the New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio Railroad is a peculiar earth formation, which was designed by those who fashioned it thousands of years ago to represent a serpent. According to the conclusion of those who have read the customs of the mound builders by the monuments they left, this particular formation is 425 feet long, and enthusiastic antiquaries who visit it are unanimous in the resemblance it represents or it presents to a snake basking in the sunshine. All right, and that's where we're gonna end, this part of the reading of this book. Again, the book Mysteries of Ancient America, Uncovering the Forbidden by Fritz Zimmerman. All right. So again, it has a lot of topics. I'm just trying to get through it. Hope you guys, enjoyed the reading today. And of course, it does have more interesting topics, but I think these were very interesting to me. I didn't know about all these serpent mounds and all these mass graves again. And we're talking about fairies and dwarfs, just anybody who doesn't understand, this info hasn't watched the previous videos, just more corroboration from different authors here, right? Appreciate you guys sticking around all the way to the end of this video, of this reading, hearing me read. It's not always perfect. I'm not perfect reading, but I've been getting better throughout the years. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that anyways. Hope you guys enjoyed it, right? We're going to have actually, there's another volume of this. There's a volume 2. This is volume 1. So as soon as we get done with this one, we'll definitely get into volume 2 of this book. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawa!